Hello everyone, and welcome to another devlog for our game, Alpaca Rancher. Alpaca Rancher is the first full-length game my husband James and I have ever created. Prior to this, we had participated in several game jams and created about a dozen jam games, all of which were made in under 2 weeks. We anticipated a full-length game would be more complicated and take more time, of course, but we struggled to understand exactly how much polish and detail was required. Our last devlog was about 4 months ago. In that video, we stated we had almost completed the game. However, the more we develop, the more items that need attention arise. So with that being said, I'd like to share with you some of the progress we've made since our last update. We've updated and implemented almost all of the UI for the game. Some areas to note are the Alpaca management screen, the plot purchase screen, and the player skills screen. There are still a few icons we need to polish, but I would say about 90% of the UI is complete. We've also taken time to consider controller support when designing our UI, so we can implement that before we launch. The area we've spent the most time on, I would say, is our quest and story system. Another major lesson Alpaca Rancher has taught us is the importance of scoping the system and gameplay loop for your entire game. This was an area we initially struggled with, as we had only made games that were intended to be played for half an hour at most. When designing Alpaca Rancher, we didn't fully appreciate that the gameplay loop would need to be enjoyable for several hours. Our initial scope for the game started and stopped at the idea of collecting alpacas and selling their wool. However, a few months in, we realized that alone may not be enough to engage our players for a substantial amount of time. Thus, the quest and story system was born. The story is meant to be a light and engaging tale to lead our player through the world. It also gives more use for wool and other items outside of simply selling them. The quests also serve to unlock new zones and to give the player another form of in-game progression. For example, we've added in a blueprint system so the player can unlock recipes by playing the story and side quests. These recipes allow you to build more upgrades for your farm. As I mentioned, the story also serves to gradually unlock the world for the player, rather than having all of Alpacos Island open to them from the start of the game. We feel this is much more fulfilling and enjoyable. Another feature we've added to our story is basic cutscenes to showcase major events in the story. The idea was mostly born when working through the quests for the second zone, which we internally call the Crystal Lands. We feel they add a nice amount of polish to the game, so we intend to revisit the first zone and rework the story to include more cutscenes, as well as to add more going forward. Another change we made is we've updated the lighting across the entire game to be much softer and more vibrant, making it much easier to see in general. Along with global lighting, we have also added glow lights. For example, the house windows now glow at night. We think this makes the game feel much more cozy. As the story progressed, we realized we would have to change some of our in-game maps to implement our ideas. Changing the maps was mostly done to allow for zones to be unlocked through the story progression. For example, in the zone Amethyst Plateau, there's a cave-in that must be cleared before you can proceed to the second area of the Crystal Lands, the Crystal Glades. A couple maps were also refined to make walking through them easier. For example, many of our caves had to be reworked as we found it was easy to get lost in them. The size was reduced and more landmarks were added so the player could more easily orient themselves. Fishing was one of the first systems we decided to implement for this game. We made the skeleton of it and then put it on the back burner for several months. By the time we came back to it, we had a very glaring question. What is even the purpose of fishing? Alpacas can't eat fish. We decided to take some liberties with this idea and theme each fish after either a fruit or a vegetable. Some examples are the mango sturgeon or the chili chovy. We figured this way, the fishing would serve a purpose in the main gameplay loop. We also plan to include fishing in our logbook, which is a collection book for the completionists out there that want to track their progression through the game. Another area we developed is an in-game map for the player. This is still a work in progress, but we have created the base of the system. The map indicates which region the player is in, as well as the other regions the player has unlocked. By clicking on a region, we then show a breakout of some of the major points of interest in the zone. Eventually, we want you to be able to hover over a point of interest and have it highlighted on the map so you know where it is. We also plan to implement a fog of war mechanic so you can only see regions that are unlocked. Once finished, we plan to have the map also show the bodies of water, the fishing spots, and teleporter pads, as well as anything else we feel is important to show. Even though our world map is basic, we feel that combined with our quest descriptions and the NPC dialogue, it gives the player a much better sense of where they are and where they need to be headed in the world. We've done some work with the player characters as well. Animations have been created for all of them. I've also done some tweaking with their designs. I may still make some changes, but so far, I love the way they all look. We've also created the Game Start UI, so when you begin a new game, you can select your player character, name them, and name your farm. We've created a basic tutorial to teach the player about the major gameplay loop in Alpaca Rancher. This is also the beginning of the story. You start out with your teacher, a master Alpaca Rancher named Master Agust. He walks you through the basics of ranching to brush up your skills before traveling out to your very own ranch. Master Agust is known to a lot of the Yarndale residents and helps you with getting your first job as an Alpaca Rancher. One of the major systems we've been working on is the save and loading system, which while self-explanatory has been a large task, but is finally complete. Additionally, we've laid the framework for localization support, so we can translate our game to other languages in the future. We have updated the lead visuals for the alpacas so that leads look like they're around their necks instead of just disappearing into the body. In general, we've also polished up the alpaca and NPC AI systems. Another thing we did was add additional items in the form of seeds, crops, forageable resources, and quest-related items to the game. Additionally, we've begun to shape the in-game economy, as well as added merchants with updated UI. We have also been working on the finishing touches for the Steam integration, such as Steam Rich Presents, so your friends can see what you're up to in the game from your Steam's friend list. Steam achievements are another aspect of this, so you can see your progress and show off your accomplishments in the game, and most importantly, Steam Cloud saves, so that players can continue playing their save game, even if their device changes. Speaking of Steam, the final point I'll touch on is we've updated our Steam store page with new art and descriptions. We plan to do at least one more pass before we release to add more screenshots and edits where needed. But overall, I'm quite happy with the state it's in right now. Feel free to check it out, the link is in the description. As mentioned before, there seems to be a never-ending amount of work that needs to be done on the game. However, we do plan to release early Q1 of 2024. More updates to come on that. With that in mind, thank you for watching another devlog for our game, Alpaca Rancher. We hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in our progress, please feel free to wishlist our game on Steam so you can be notified of its release.